pressing on the upward way, new heights I'm gaining every day, still praying as I onward bound. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's stable land, a higher place I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. My heart has no desire to stay where doubts arise and fears dismay. Though some may dwell where these abound, my prayer, my aim is higher ground. I want to live about the world, though Satan's darts at me are hurled, for faith has caught the joyful sound, the song of saints on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's stable land, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. I want to scale the utmost height and catch the gleam of glory bright, but still I'll pray till heaven I've found. Lord, lead me on to higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's stable land, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground.
Yeah. So, my topic for today, be careful not to mock what you do not understand, is taken from Second Peter chapter 2 and verse 12. We can turn there. So it talks about the type of men who will arise in the last days. But this phrase from within Second Peter chapter 2 and verse 12 says reviling where they have no knowledge. And if you look at multiple translations, it says mocking what they do not understand, or scoffing at things they do not understand, blaspheming where they are ignorant, using abusive speech, speaking evil where they have no knowledge. And just that phrase sort of, caught my heart. Um, we notice that he's actually talking about angelic majesties. Okay, so these are, you know, fallen angels, uh, but still, God is saying that you have to be careful about what you say in regard to them. And there are many things you don't understand. And, don't just say anything that comes to your mouth. Don't revile where you don't understand. Don't mock what you don't understand. Let's just look at that phrase and think about its application. This, phrase sort of caught my attention um, because of some young people, who I know and I care about, who were increasingly influenced or disturbed in their spiritual walk by some intellectual arguments, okay, and some videos that they saw, by atheists and about evolution, things like that. And I thought I wanted to, understand their point of view a little better. So I watched some of these videos myself. As best as I can make out, the theory of evolution, it explains small changes, between animals, within animals, a certain kind of animal, you can see small changes. You could call it adaptation, you could call it evolution if you like. It cannot explain how life came from non life. It has not come close to explaining how life started where there was no life. And it cannot explain how one kind of animal can change to another, whether and if one kind of animal can change to another kind of animal. Okay. And I mean, once again, I'm not a scientist. This is my best understanding of how far it goes. But like whatever it is, like you find a lot of argument, uh, but they're not getting further than I don't know. But what they say with great confidence is that you also don't know, right? So science can't explain it, and the best they can say is I don't know. But they can say you also don't know. We can say God did it. Okay, we believe that to be true. But that's not a scientific explanation. We don't know how exactly he did it, right? If it was my job to be a scientist, I might try and dig deeper, but it's not my job. So, I mean, God did it is good enough for me. And if scientists find out more, I'm happy for them. But as of now, evolution is not giving you a good answer, right? So, but more than the strength of the arguments or the lack of strength of the arguments, I noticed that consistently there was a certain tone that people took, right? And the tone in the arguments is mocking what they do not understand, using abusive or insulting speech, right? So, I mean, they consistently say things along the lines of, "Oh, you say God did everything. How do you know that, pink fairies did not do everything, or aliens from another planet, Or they'll say, "You're brainwashed. You're a religious fool. You don't understand anything about science." And and that's fine. Like, people say all sorts of things, and praise God, we can, say, "Father, forgive them." But the danger I saw is that tone and that way of talking, creeps in on the other side as well. Even those who claim to be Christian, if you're supporting like intelligent design, you're saying, it's quite obvious that God made everything. Like, how is it possible? But that tone of despising others and looking down on others, right? And I felt it was a dangerous thing, and we have to guard our hearts, minds, and tongues. And I say this especially speaking to young people. So let's just think about this application, for you as young people. On one hand, we're very conscious that, when we move from being a child into your teens and your youth, you suddenly have this burst of knowledge. There are so many things that you understand that you did not understand as a child. You know, your hormones come alive, and you suddenly feel like, hey, my parents are old-fashioned. They don't know a lot. There are many things I understand, but at the same time, if we're honest, we have to be clear that there are many things, especially spiritual things, that we don't understand. Maybe you understand technology better than your, dad does. Okay, but when it comes to spiritual things, we you don't understand. Like, just because, even if you are a keen, interested, humble young brother, you have probably not had the time together with God to understand, spiritual things that people who've walked with the Lord for a long time have. And to recognize that, and to avoid this danger when I know a little bit, to start looking down on others who I feel no less than me, right? Let's just look at, the Pharisees and Jesus. So we can look at what happened in John 8, okay, as an example of this sort of reviling or despising where I don't know or I don't understand. In John 8, verse 41, so the Pharisees were learned men. They spent a lot of time studying the law and was broadly in the sphere of religion. Uh, they thought they knew something about God. Okay, and their assessment of Jesus' situation was that Jesus was born of fornication. It's quite clear that they are implying an insult over there. That unlike you, we are not born of fornication. Okay, what is it that actually happened? Jesus was conceived of the Holy Spirit. Okay, now that is not something we can understand with our intelligence. We believe that to be true, and we look at Jesus's life and what he said, and I trust nobody over here has any doubt that that's how it was. But you see the danger of what these people are doing. They are reviling, you know, what they do not understand. Okay. Further on in that chapter, in John 8, verse 48, they say, do we not say rightly that you are a Samaritan and have a demon? You are a Samaritan, once again, pointing to raising doubts about his parentage, and then saying he has a demon. See, the strength and authority with which Jesus spoke shocked them. There was something there they did not understand. There was an unseen spiritual power. They did not understand it. They chose to revile it. They said this is a demon. The possibility that, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God, had filled, the Son of God, and he was walking on earth as he claimed to be the Son of Man. Not a possibility that they were open to. Okay, but they chose to revile what they did not understand. And this is common to the flesh of man, right? If there's something we don't understand, we have a tendency to revile it. And I want to urge you as young people to guard against that tendency. Um, you know, Many times you don't understand the position your parents take or godly elders take in relation to many things. Don't allow your mind to entertain, thoughts along the lines that they are old-fashioned, uh, or otherwise, unwise. Don't despise them, don't revile them. Okay. The solution to many of those things that you don't understand is in 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 14. It says, a natural man does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him. He cannot understand them because they are spiritually appraised. But he who is spiritual appraises all things, yet he himself is appraised by no one. Right? So, young people, like, we have to understand. I mean, the closest way I could explain it logically is sort of like an additional sense. Uh, you know, if you take a blind man and you try and explain to him what red is, the color red is, if he's been born blind, it's very hard, you know, for him to actually understand it, right? He just doesn't have that sense. Uh, we know that there are dogs that hear, pitches that we can't hear, right? Or that sharks can detect electromagnetic waves. We can't detect electromagnetic waves. So it's something like that. There's an additional sense, that a spiritual man has, and it is well developed. And that, that a spiritual person can see and discern things that I cannot. And I have to grow in, the knowledge of the Spirit, the fullness of the Spirit, to see things, to discern things. Just to receive that with humility and not to mock, not to despise, not to revile. Uh, yeah. And I also say this besides being young because there's another side to it, right? When we are young and you're all here at this youth meeting, I assume by your own choice. You're here because you have an interest, right? So many of you, I mean, I would hope that most of you are born again. The Lord has spoken to you, and we hear excellent teaching, right? Brother Zach and CFC, the quality of teaching is excellent, and we have benefited from it. We may imagine that we know things, we are somebody or something, but if we take that attitude that I know, oh, that person doesn't know, and I look down on him, whoever it is, maybe unbelieving friends, maybe people from other Christian backgrounds, we will find that we are separating ourselves from God. We will find ourselves, not on God's side. Uh, and it's this pride in our knowledge that is hurting us. And you know, we know because God in his goodness and mercy revealed something to us. And to look down on somebody else who has not gone through the same circumstances, who has not had the benefit of that of this kind of teaching that we've had, we don't know so much about his parents, his background, what he's gone through. Um, so it is not our position to judge, and it is especially not our position to despise, and we should guard ourselves against that. Again, I want to, turn you to John 7, verse 46. John 7, 46, the story there. The Pharisees said, so they had sent some officers to arrest Jesus, and the officers came back and they said, never has a man spoken the way this man speaks. So these officers knew their job. They, were used to quelling rebellions and insubordination. They were highly organized force. I would expect so. They were Roman officers. And they tried, went to arrest Jesus, and they said, "Hey, there's something different over here. This is not a criminal. Not just that, he's not an ordinary man. He's speaking in such a way that no man has ever spoken before." But the Pharisees were blind to that. They were not in a position to receive that. They were not in a position to understand that, something that, Roman soldiers could easily understand. And they said, "Have you also been led astray? None of the rulers or Pharisees have believed in them. This crowd," so they're pointing to a whole lot of people, who were drawn to Jesus based on what he was saying. "Oh, they don't know the law, they are accursed." Right? So the knowledge that they had, it puffed up their hearts and they'd shut themselves to genuine, spiritual truth or revelation. Yeah, so I want to point you to this verse in 1 Corinthians where it draws a distinction. 1 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 1. It says, "Knowledge makes arrogant, but love edifies. If anyone supposes that he knows anything, he has not yet known as he ought to know." So here's the thing. This is a psychological effect that people have found in relation to earthly knowledge as well. If somebody knows a little bit, it's easy for him to overestimate the amount of knowledge that he has in any field. If somebody is really an expert, he tends to realize that, hey, actually, I don't know a lot. He tends to feel that way, okay? Because he knows enough to know the extent of knowledge there is in a field, and he tends to have, a more sober or humble. And this is not just in, when it comes to spiritual things. Knowledge itself tends to puff up. But there's a contrast drawn between knowledge and love. It says love builds up or edifies. And it says, if anyone loves God, he is known by him. If anyone supposes that he knows anything, he has not yet known as he ought to know. So whenever we get into this position of, hey, I know you don't know, right? I suppose that I know something, we have to really examine our hearts and see whether we are missing out on love. I don't know as I ought to know, right? But if I love God, then God knows everything about me, and that is what I can put my trust in. I want to love God, in response to His love, and then He will help me to do what is right, with my knowledge as well. We can see what it says about God Himself. It says that in Job chapter 36, Job that chapter 36 and verse 5. Um, yeah, Job 36 and verse 5. It says, "God is mighty, but he despises no one." God is mighty, but he despises no one. Behold, God is mighty, he does not despise anyone. He is mighty in the strength of understanding. Or, you know, yeah, so basically, because God understands everything, with a fullness, he doesn't despise anyone. So he's powerful, you know, and he's not just powerful, he's wise, he's loving. That gives him insight into every person's situation. And because he has that kind of power, might of understanding, he does not despise anyone. And that is the God who we want to try and emulate and be like. If I truly understand somebody else's condition, which I cannot as a human being, I cannot entirely, fully understand, except as the Spirit of God reveals to me. But even then, it's imperfect. Oh, I will not despise him. I will not despise him. See, young people generally, you have to look at what your own judgment, your own life, what you control, what you say, what you think. Uh, I mean, you're not in a position of authority over others. When God gives us authority over others as parents, or otherwise gives us responsibilities, maybe something in the church or part of a team or something like that, then the Lord gives you insight to help those people spiritually, right? But we have to function within a certain boundary. And whenever, so I have to make righteous judgments. I have to take, sin seriously. I have to correct if there's a corrupting influence. I have to stop that. But in all these things, there is an element of love, of compassion, if I truly understand, not despising. And we see that if God is mighty, He's mighty in understanding, He does not despise anyone, right? And when we despise others, when we look down on others, when we try and make them small, then we're separating ourselves from God. I want to point you to Psalm 138 and verse 6. Psalm 138 and verse 6 says, God sees and regards and draws near the lowly, but the haughty he knows from afar. So just imagine there are two people, one person knows a lot, the other person doesn't know a lot, and he confesses he doesn't know a lot, and he's humble. The Lord will see and understand that lowly person's, state, and he will draw near to him. But the sense I get from this verse is that haughty person who is right, who has some knowledge, but that comes, that pride along, that puffs up, that comes along with the puffing up that comes along with it. The Lord smells that. He doesn't have to come close, and He avoids him. He goes in the other direction. He says, "I'm never going to be on that person's side." Um, this is something that should challenge us. I know in the zeal of youth, we feel like I should be loyal, I should take sides, I should stand up for the truth. But there's a way of doing that, without looking down on others. And the cry in our heart should be, Lord, help me love. Help me love more like you loved. In the book of James, it talks about the kind of wisdom that we are called to have. It says, who among you is wisdom, is wise and understanding? James chapter 3, verse 13. Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds in the gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy, selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and lie against the truth. So young people, when you find yourself dealing with others and you feel like you know more than them and you want to help them, you know, uh, watch your behavior, watch your tone, watch your heart's attitude. Are you looking down on them? Are you despising them? Or are you showing that you are wise and understanding by your good behavior in the gentleness of wisdom? What a challenge that is. I, you know, it's something that we sort of can learn the hard way and we can drive people away from us. Or, maybe the Lord can speak to us at a young age and say, Lord, love is what edifies. Let me show by my good behavior in the gentleness of wisdom, you know, and I want to be on your side, doing things the way you do it. Uh, I found a poem by Brother Zach, not a poem, it's an article by Brother Zach. I sort of took an excerpt from that. I want to read it to you. Maybe I can circulate it, afterwards or something. Maybe some of you have seen this already, but it challenged me. When I am right, I can be wrong. Every time I see something right in another person, it tends to minimize me, okay, because I see something right in that person. It makes it easier for me to have a proper relationship with God as a creature with my Creator. Every time I see something wrong in others, it is more dangerous because it can exalt myself, and when this happens, my fellowship with God falls to the ground. Right? So when I am right, I can be wrong. In the midst of being right, if it exalts myself, my fellowship with God is destroyed. It's not wrong to be right, it's wrong to have the wrong attitude in being right. No, again, to recognize what have I got, what have I received, except that which is given to me out of God's mercy. And then I have a cry in my heart, Lord, you have been merciful to me. You can be merciful to this brother, sister as well. Right? Jesus said, forgive them, they don't know what they are doing. Uh, you know, may the Lord change us in terms of how we see these things. And it's so easy, it comes up in our flesh so easily to look down on others. And he says, Yeah, in the midst of being right, if it exalts myself, my fellowship with God is destroyed. It's not wrong to be right, it's wrong to have the wrong attitude in being right. To forget that my attitude towards my fellow men must always be characterized by humility and respect, the gentleness of wisdom. If I really love a man as myself, I will long to see him be what he could be on the basis of Christ's complete work. This is what I desire for myself on the basis of Christ's complete work. Yeah, so brothers and sisters, this is sort of foundational. Right at the beginning of time, there was a tree of knowledge of good and evil, and then there was a tree of life. And in Second Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, Paul sort of describes this tree of life as a simple, pure devotion to Jesus. So this lust that we have, to be right and to know more and, to exalt myself above others is in contrast to a simple, pure devotion to Jesus. Yeah, all you know, God made us in His image, and it's interesting to see that we can see sort of in 1 Corinthians that He made other kinds of flesh. 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Corinthians 15, verse 40, verse 39 says, "All flesh is not the same. There is one flesh of men, one flesh of beasts, one flesh of birds, one flesh of fish." Okay, so if we look at the fifth and sixth days of creation, you've got all four of those covered there. I'm quoting from 1 Corinthians 15:39, and I'm just talking about the days of creation. So on the fifth day, there were the fish created, the birds created, the beasts created, and then there was man created in the image of God. And it says, there is a glory that we can seek for if we die to ourselves, put our flesh to death. There is an eternal glory. We can become like God if we put these fleshly instincts to death, right? And and I was just thinking about the difference between the fish and the birds. Like, so the fish is like a picture of worldly people, they're plunged in the affairs of this world. But then you have the picture of the birds. They seem like they're heavenly minded, they're soaring in the skies, but they're looking down on everyone else. And we know what they're looking for, right? They're basically seeking their own, and they're looking down on everybody else. And you know, God has created us to be in His image. There is a greater glory that we can seek for, and we have to put this instinct, to death. I want to close by looking at, yeah, this the words of this song. It's a hymn that we sing. It says, "I know whom I have believed, and I am persuaded that He is able to keep that which I have committed unto Him against that day." Knowing that Jesus is able to keep us, again, until that final day, right? And then he says, there are many things I don't know. First verse, I don't know why God's wondrous grace to me he hath made known, nor why unworthy Christ in love redeemed me for his own. Why has God chosen to show his wondrous grace to me when I was unworthy? Why has Christ in love chosen to redeem me? There is no way, brothers and sisters, you can ever find a logical explanation to that. There is, we, come to the end of our understanding. There is no good reason for that. Will we despise it? Will we take it lightly? Will we mock it? Maybe we have in the past, but now we come to that place where we say, Lord, I don't understand it, but I want to treasure this, that you have chosen, me, unworthy, to make known your wondrous grace to me. I don't know why. But I know whom I have believed, I am persuaded he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day. I do not know how this saving faith to me he doth impart, how believing in his word wrought peace within my heart. How exactly did that happen? Can you explain the processes and the sub processes of, you know, how holding on to the word of Christ wrought faith in my heart and wrought an everlasting eternal change? How does the Spirit work in the hearts of men? I cannot explain it, but I don't want to revile it. I don't want to mock it. And I want to have this hope, that what God did for me, He can do it for others. Verse 3, I do not know how the Spirit moves, convincing men of sin, revealing Jesus through the Word, creating faith in Him. See, this is something that the Lord wants us to learn. Not the process, but how to work along with God. And the answer there again is love. The love of God is poured out in our hearts through the Holy Spirit. And when the love of God fills our hearts and we speak words of wisdom, but there is no despising. And it touches and it changes, and there's power there. Oh, brothers and sisters, may the Lord help us to be careful with our words. Be careful, guard our hearts against pride, uh, and allow the Lord to change us to be more like Him. Amen.